Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone is well. Today we're going to go on and do our Learning Unit 2, Theme 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's the content that we're covering today. I just hope everyone can hear me. So can you just give me a thumbs up if you can? Perfect, 100%. Okay, so while I share my screen, just a quick announcement, which I did share already. Your first ICE task has been loaded. You should see it on ARC already. That due date is for the 19th of August, which is next week, Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. Please try and stick within the due dates. I know I said at the beginning of semester that the due dates are soft due dates, but it does help you to do the learning units as we finish off a theme, because it just helps you to sort of center on that specific topic. You can learn and understand it a lot better. It also helps you where you're not doing 4 ICE tasks at the end of the semester. So stick within those due dates. That's my only and best advice that I can give you. And you would basically submit it the exact same way that you would an assignment. I've already created a little link on ARC. It's under assignments, and then there's ICE tasks. So all 4 ICE tasks will fall under that subheading. Okay, I'm not going to take too much of time doing announcements because we do have quite a bit of content to cover today. So I at least want to try and cover everything that we can possibly. The reason why we are quite stuck with focusing on having one learning unit per live lecture, as well as, and I try and break it down and have smaller learning lectures in the recordings, is that if you do have questions, we can answer it in the live lecture. Also, we have 10 learning units in this module. So that is a lot of content that we have to cover. And in between those lectures, we still have to do national support sessions for your assignments, etc. So I want you to focus on the things that's going to help you at the end of the day. Okay. So the first one that we're going on, so this is a very interesting topic. It is based on customers, customer satisfaction, product design, product manufacturing, how to get new ideas when it comes to new products, etc. So this is more or less like the marketing side of the supply chain more than the technicality part that we quite often go through in our lectures. So the first thing is we want to understand what is customer satisfaction. So how we would sort of note customer satisfaction in layman's terms is basically how well your company's product or your company's services meet the expectations of the customer or exceeds the expectations of the customer. It basically will be able to reflect the degree to which your customer is happy with their experiences and with the interactions with the business that they're dealing with, whether it's from a product perspective or it's from a service perspective. So how do we now manage the process with making sure that your customer has the sort of maximum satisfaction within your, what your product is or what your service is? And the first one is we want to understand who your key customers are. So whether it means identifying or even understanding what the specific needs of key customers or key groups of customers or even potential customers are. You want to try and segment the market so that you can tailor products that will meet the different market needs. So for instance, you have, let's say Pick and Pay, for instance. So they had they've got Pick and Pay, and then they've got your Boxer stores. So your Boxer stores caters a lot to your lower LSM group, and that's where their target market is generally in like outlying or more regional areas. And then you have your Pick and Pay, which is more metropolitan major centers, and that's catered to sort of the mid-level high LSM group. So here they're understanding who their customers are. They obviously want to service a whole different or the entire demographic of the population. And by doing that, they segmented their business into such a way where they understood where the lower LSM was sitting so that they could provide for them, as well as understanding where the mid to high level LSM group is now sitting. So it does allow for, better satisfaction. I'll give you some experience from a sales perspective, and this is more from a service than a product. But even if you are offering a service, let's say it's a logistics service that you're offering to your customer, it's always nice to go in there. Everybody can move a parcel from point A to point B, but it's the value adds, it's the how can you best wow them? What is the different charismas you can offer them? The solution, how you can basically change their business from a profit perspective or increase their cash flow a little bit better. I can only know this if I understand my customer and if I understand where their supply chain is sitting and how I can make a difference within their supply chain. So, number one rule, understand who your customers are, whether it's groups of them, a different market of them, but segment the market so you offer different tailor-made solutions to different markets. Then it's understanding or listening to the voice of your customer. What is your customer's needs? What is your customer's expectation? So understand it both from a short-term and a long-term perspective so you can now exceed that expectation. As well as you need to be listening and learning where you would be able to implement different activities that facilitate listening and also learning from your customers. So if, for instance, you have a new product in the market, you now probably choose a different sample size, let's say 3 different market groups. You choose a sample size within the 3 market groups, and you now throw your product out there. So by listening and learning to the voice of your customer, you're able to know whether your design's working, is your production process working, is the quality now up to standard, is your delivery process working? So you now will understand a little bit better whether what you've implemented is working based on what your customer is telling you. Then it's building of a customer relationship, and we do this through sort of many things. Number one is through from a trust and confidence perspective. It's where you would be able to demonstrate something from a reliability perspective and an integrity perspective. What you said you're giving them is what you are giving them. Sort of from an accessibility, what accessibility you have to the customer, as well as any market information, so that you always know about your customers' preferences and you know about the trends in the industry. And then you want to be able to set service standards where you can meet or exceed the customer's expectation. And then there's training where you want to be able to provide appropriate training for your customer, where you can get employees to ensure that they deliver the exceptional service, especially if you have introducing a new product and it's more like a service. You want to do a blitz session or a marketing session, whatever that may be, you're now pushing it out to having employees at different stations or different stands. And then a good after sale. So something that is effective as well as efficient. A lot of times what happens is somebody buys a product and then the returns process or the exchange process is absolutely miserable. So you want to be able to still maintain your customer satisfaction through a return process. And I know everything that I'm saying to you right now is stuff that you know. 100%. As humans, we do know that this is what you need if you want to start a business, sell a product, render a service. But it's always nice to know that this is what a lot of businesses sit with. Okay. Then we want to talk about sort of your complaints management process. And from this perspective, you want sort of feedback channels that is quite easy in terms of that can provide feedback or you can lodge complaints. So a lot of times now people are going very AI, especially with feedback channels or complaints management processes. They've got a little like help desks or little bots on their website where you can now go and ask them, various different questions. You can lodge a complaint or lodge a return, whatever the case may be, and that bot can then help you. What's great, especially with having something that's a complaint management process that's sort of like run by AI in the background, is that a lot of times people want to go through the process when they're done working their 9 to 5 and they're now sitting at home and, oh my God, I forgot to do this. And now they remember that they need to do it. So it's always nice that they can quickly now just, pop a message or pop an email and you know that it's getting done. Then it's key performance indicators or KPIs. It's how you can now measure anything from a satisfaction perspective. So you need to understand what the KPIs are going to be of how you can measure or how you can analyze your customer satisfaction, whether you are tracking your product returns because there's defective products, or whether there's from a quality perspective, or your customer just, didn't enjoy the product, whatever the case may be. Then there's a performance analysis where you use different analysis of different KPIs. So there's various ways you can run KPIs. I mean, I've seen systems, ERP or SAP systems that go next level in terms of KPI, where you don't even have to put in any information. Everything is just, it's spat out because everything is so automated and electronic right now. And you can use this analysis of KPIs from an improvement perspective. And then the last one is competition or competitor analysis in the market. It's how you can carefully consider competitors and what role they play in the market. So you can identify, which is always nice, is for you to do a SWOT analysis. So when you look at from a SWOT analysis, your strength and your weakness is something that you can control 100%, and it's internal. When you look at it from an opportunity and threat perspective, it's the external environment. So you need to know from a competition perspective what opportunities lie for you as a business in the market or in the industry. And then what do you see as threats? Is it a particular company, a particular person, particular service provider, or is it your product itself? What is the threat? And then you can refine your sort of products and your product offerings to now get into a better space. Okay. Is there any questions so far? Okay. Okay, we can move on. Then we move on, which is to something that is comes up very often, and it's something called the product life cycle. Okay, so bring my mouse down a little bit. I think that's better. So when we're looking at it from a product life cycle perspective, we first want to understand what is product development. Okay, so whether it's product or whether it's service, we look at it from a development perspective, and we want to look at anything that has a focused research and anything that has something from a design capability that can deliver a product that can be marketed, so that is marketable, and will deliver against the market share and the profitable targets that's set by the business. So whereas your product life cycle, on the other hand, can guide this development process and make sure that all the improvements that you have on existing products happen, right up to when you reach your peak, which is at a maturity level. So new products are then developed and it's released basically, let's say, into the market during your decline phase. And you can then support something from a competitiveness perspective or even profitability from the, but I think you'll be able to get more of an idea when we go through the actual product life cycle. As I said, this is a very common in terms of coming out in previous exams, even ICE tasks, and as well as assignments. So understand what the product life cycle is. So the first one is introduction. So you'll see it starts right at the bottom. And basically in the introduction stage, your product is introduced to the market. So you spend a lot of money in investing in the marketing, the advertising, the product development, everything that has to do with the product. It's, you're putting in a lot of financial expenditure. You want to expose the product to the market so that you can attract as many customers as possible. You gain um, a social name. You can gain some market share, so that basically at the introduction stage it's very, very critical. Therefore, you'll see a lot, especially when it comes to like SMMEs, when they do run small businesses, that introduction phase that they do, they tend to spend a lot of money from a marketing perspective, whether it's having a big showcase day, opening night, or they get professionals in terms of videography where they can post stuff on social media. So that introduction phase, it's a very costly phase, but it's something where you'll be able to get your name into the market specifically. Then we want to look at the growth phase. So when we're looking at growth, this sort of stage is also quite high in terms of marketing and advertising and spending a lot of money on that portion. But this a lot of times gets offset by the sales of your business, because we're now in the growth phase, which means that as much as you are spending money, you're also getting enough revenue in, and that's where your sort of offset is coming into place, because your product is increasing its market share at the end of the day. And another name for the growth phase is called the ascent phase, okay, or ascent stage. Then we have the one that's right at the top. So this is the peak, which is called your maturity phase. So when we look at it from a maturity side, it's very steady, it's very consistent in a steady revenue stream at this point. Retaining customers. I just had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. Can everyone still hear me? Can I just get a thumbs up? Okay, good, perfect. Okay, so yes, when we're looking at it from a maturity perspective, the objective here is just to retain your customer. It's to keep your customer and keep getting the revenue and increasing the revenue, obviously, and increasing as much market share. So the main objective or the goal of any business at this level is to try and prolong your maturity stage for as long as you possibly can. And at this stage, it is the most profitable period of the life cycle, because you're now spending less money. So you're being a lot more cost evasive, a little bit more efficient with your cost savings. However, your revenue is either doubled or quadrupled. So this is where you want to stay. Okay. Most opportune place to be in from a business perspective. But with every business, something comes along and we then move into the decline stage. So as the sales in your product sort of start declining, for instance, the product becomes a little bit less relevant in the market, then the product will reach a stage where it gets to a retirement level. We've seen it a lot of times where products just basically get shunted out of the market and out of the industry. And I suppose a lot of times what happens with those products is people's sort of disposable income changes. When your disposable income changes, you tend to go for something that's a lot more cost effective as opposed to going for a brand. Like your no-name brands, etc. Those become a little bit more attractive to people as opposed to going and buying like Hewlett Sugar or Clover Fresh Milk, like that sort of vibe. So decline, it's basically where the product sort of reached its retirement stage. So the product is sort of abandoned or not really worried about much by the producer itself. And naturally, it then starts to lose sales because it's now not commercially viable to produce it. So it becomes basically like a non-existent product. So at every stage here, from an intro, a growth, a maturity, before it gets to a decline level, a marketing strategy needs to be tailored to each stage of the life cycle so that you can maximize opportunities, you can maximize as much sales as possible, and allow the business to basically engage with different issues that are unique to it, to every single phase. You know, there's one brand that I don't know if they, I mean, I haven't checked what their market share is or anything else, but it's a brand that always keeps up to the marketing regime at every step. And that's a brand like Nando's. Okay. Any big event that happens in the country or in a specific province, Nando's already has a slogan and a tagline attached to it. And that's what keeps people drawn. As much as it quadrupled in price over the years, the bottom line is it's still a product that people still resonate with. So that, you know, and it's I think it's at the growth and the maturity level right now before it reached decline phase. I mean, I haven't seen a Nando's close down as yet. Okay. Then we want to go to the different steps in the design process. So this is when you are basically designing your product before the product is actually sort of produced. Okay, the design phase basically needs to be completed. So the steps in the design phase, and this is more the theoretical steps in the design phase, it can be changed, it can be tailored to suit the different companies, the different product, or the different services, but more or less this is the design process. So the first one is the planning phase. So you want to go in with first time planning from an initial perspective, where you have the plan and the design strategies basically developed. Anything from what can go in from a tech and innovation, a practical perspective is all investigated or it's sort of analyzed. And then we go into a concept development phase. So you understand who you want to sell to, so your different target markets, and what does your customer want or that target market wants. So you need to understand your key customers and what's going to satisfy them at the end of the day, and run through various different scenarios of how you can or can't be successful. So I think a SWOT analysis would be great at this stage. Then we go into a system design process where you look at all the different systems, the subsystems that's basically used by, within that production process or manufacturing process for the new product to be done, or maybe an existing product to be changed or modified. So you can now change the process a little bit better. Then detailed design, so where you look at the specification of that specific good that you want to produce. It's captured, it's designed in detail, and then you need to understand what's the full supply chain of this. What is the different raw materials that you need? What is the quality standards you want to set up? What is the manufacturing process? Who do you need? What do you need? That sort of questions. So all of this goes into step 4, which is your detailed design phase. And a lot of times what happens is, especially in the detailed design phase, a lot of businesses use something called a Gantt chart. I know when I was doing my master's, we had to do something very similar, not design a process, but introduce a product sort of to the market of transportation. And we had to do a Gantt chart. And the Gantt chart spoke about every single detail within that process and the time frames and who needs to be involved, what it's going to cost, all of that. So having all of that detail down in a Gantt chart process does help the case. Then we go into testing and an improvement phase, where you would make up some sort of prototype or some sort of initial product, and you now want to test the performance of the product. So you go run through the testing, you run through any improvement phases. Maybe you have a sample size or a different target market that you want to show your product to sort of generate some ideas or voices of your customer. You can do all of this through your testing and improvement stage. And then the last one is production initialization stage. So actual production basically begins with having people to do your work. People are being trained, different processes, when they have to create new items or redesign an existing item. So you need to be able to have a very sustainable production process where you have the quality that you want, conformity that you want, basically everything that you want in that perspective. Okay, so that steps in the design process. Then while we're in design, we want to speak about the different designs sort of from a robust and then a DFM perspective, okay? So when we're looking at it from a robust design, we want to understand what robust design is in the first place. So textbook example is your robust design is a scientific approach to design products and services to make sure that your performance goals are met. Basically, what this means is you are sort of involving a lot of or accommodating a lot of different processes and conditions and different usage levels to make sure that you have the maximum product life. So your product stays fresh for longer or lasts longer in terms from a quality perspective. So an example, and I've got it here, is like the Toyota Hilux, for instance. So the Toyota Hilux is quite a versatile, quite a robust vehicle itself, used around the country. Okay, so the prime example for it, especially from a South African context, is having diversity in terms of ranging from whether you are urban commuting, taking your kids to school, or whether you are from an off-road condition, taking this vehicle out for a spin. So you need to understand the different variations of it. So you want to look at minimizing some variation in terms of when they're going through the manufacturing process for, let's say, this Toyota Hilux. You want to ensure that you have consistency in terms of quality, in terms of performance. You want to use high quality materials so that you have less variation in the final product. You also want better usage conditions. So whether it means the vehicle itself be engineered to basically perform under a whole different range of conditions, whether it's like as I mentioned, your city streets or heavy loads or construction sites or challenging terrains, rural areas. The vehicle needs to be robust enough and designed better to adapt and perform as effectively as possible. So you see where the examples are coming into play. And, a lot of times, especially with our logistics modules, most of your results or your marks come out of application. So if you get an example, like for instance, a case study from a robust design perspective, you need to number one, understand what robust design is. Your theory is coming from that. Where is your application? Maybe you want to bring in an outside example, like the one I'm bringing in with the Toyota Hilux. So it's understanding where and what you need to bring in and in what context it needs to now fit in. Looking at external sources, especially when you're looking at your assignments, it will be a game changer for your results. Don't always look into the textbook because it is not always healthy to just take theory from there. You always need to look at outside sources. When I prepare for your lecture, I don't only look at the textbook, I always try and bring in examples from an outside source, just so that it helps you understand it a little bit more. Okay, I know I did venture out a little bit, but I'm coming back to the Hilux. We also want to have a product that's robust, meaning that they have a longer shelf life, or let's say a maximum product life, for instance. So the Hilux itself is built with longevity in mind. It needs to be functional, it needs to be reliable, it needs to last as long as possible through the different conditions. So the design process needs to have um, um, pretty easy maintenance, pretty easy repairs, just so that the vehicle is operational and it has minimum downtime. Okay. Then we want to talk about manufacturability. Okay. And then also, with it comes something with value or analyzing the different values. So manufacturability is also known as DFM, which is designed for manufacturing. So it's based on the premise that products need to be made in a way that makes them easy to manufacture. So easier the product is to produce, the more cost effective it will be, and risks of poor quality is then decreased. Okay, so I hope you got it. And I think you'll get it better when we go through the example. So I don't know if a lot of you know Bell equipment. Okay, so Bell equipment basically does heavy machineries, ADTs, so your articulated dump trucks, a lot of products that is part of the mining, construction, sort of agricultural industry. So they are, from a South African perspective, a prime example of a company that has manufacturability and has a good value analysis when it comes to the manufacturing process of their specific product. So Bell Equipment basically has DFM principles to ensure that their dump trucks specifically are easier to manufacture, they're cost effective, and they're high quality. Okay, so firstly, you need a design that is quite simple. So with Bell equipment and the specific sort of ADT or those dump trucks, the design itself is very simple. So minimizing the number of parts and try using sort of multifunctional components where you can use one component in numerous different ways. The company then reduces any sort of complexity in their manufacturing process. So it doesn't only lower their production costs, but it also increases their reliability in the market. Then we want to look at something that's a little bit more standardized. So the company uses a lot of standardized components across different models of their dump trucks. So it basically makes the manufacturing process a lot simple. Also, the sort of after sales, like your maintenance and your repairs, all of those things then just become a lot more easier. And especially when you have different engine components or whether it's hydraulic components or hydraulic systems, you want it to be quite interchangeable when your models change, so that you don't have a lot of multiple unique parts. The worst possible thing is having to wait months and months and months just for parts for a specific vehicle because something had gone wrong. From my personal experience, I had a little small tiny accident in 2021, November of 2021. I think it was just my boot that got an SUV, so it was the boot that was just like pushed in. It took the company 3 months. So November was the accident. November, December, January, February, 4 months I had no vehicle because that's how long it took for them to bring parts down to fix my vehicle. And it was drivable. It just was the boot was the problem. So yeah, we need to look at things that are a lot more easier and standardized and allow people to have business continuity at the end of the day, not put them out. Yeah, so this is basically robust design. So this is robust. You want something that's high quality, going to last long in every single condition. And manufacturability is you want the product to be as cost effective as possible. You want it to be able to um, be easy from a manufacturing perspective and still be of high quality at the end of the day. And that's as simplistic as possible. Okay. We're actually going through it. Okay, no, we've got not a lot of time. Okay, the next one we're going to go through is the generation of new product ideas. Okay, so when we look at the process of idea generation itself, it basically needs a lot of talents from a lot of creative souls. Okay, and not everybody has that creative mindset of how best they could generate new product ideas. And a lot of times what happens is businesses employ people who have these game-changing ideas of different ways, whether it's from a marketing perspective, a product perspective, an advertising, whatever it is. There's different specific talents that people have. So some of the things are you want something from a creativity perspective. Especially when you're thinking about your existing product line and how better you can take it from, let's say, a decline phase into a growth phase. You want to analyze your competitors' products. You want to know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and then from there, know what works and what doesn't work. Asking for ideas from existing and potential customers, which we did speak about earlier on as well. You also want to invite stakeholders in the quest for new ideas, whether it's your supplier, a manufacturer, a customer, a customer's supplier, a customer's customer, from whoever it is that can be part of the quest for new ideas. Those are the people that you need around the table, because they may have the knowledge of something that worked in a first world country and us wanting to introduce it into a third world country. Then we want to focus on the needs of the customer, which they don't necessarily express. A lot of times what happens is customers have a bad service, or customers go through something that is, a bad product or a bad experience, and they don't necessarily express it. So it's finding ways of how you can now generate the feedback from customers so that you can focus on getting better in terms of your product. And then involve your suppliers in the innovation process. So especially when it comes to product innovation, it's always nice to involve them. They may have different technology, they may have different techniques they can use to make your process a lot smoother, or they may be just a tech that they want to or thinking about investing, and they may become, the sort of monopoly with that specific product. So it's just communicating and understanding from that perspective. So with new product ideas, there's also different factors that influence the need for new product ideas or new service opportunities. And there's different factors, and the first one is from an economic perspective. So it's not always the case, but this basically gives you some sort of an idea of what goes into it within the market space. So the first one is economic factors. When we're looking at it from an economic factor, it's how you are now living with this economy specifically. What is the economic growth of the country? What is the inflation rate? How has that changed? How it's affected your business? The interest rate, how's that changed and affected your business both positively or negatively? And what is all of these things here basically influences how your business performs from a profit perspective, and also how your customer has enough disposable income and what is their purchasing power. So these things may not always be in the control of a business. However, it is in control of people's pockets. So whether it's the man on the street or whether it's the business that is not running well, maybe because of the profitability being changed, they now need to look at more cost-effective ways of doing things and maybe skimping a little bit on quality. They may have to reduce their staff count or their overhead costs. Whatever that change may be, it does affect the business, and then in turn, will affect the consumer. Then we want to look at technology advances. So different technology changes does influence the expectation of your customer, as well as how you're going to go about producing the product in your production process. So cost savings can also be achieved when you're looking at better technology advances, because you're probably running um, an item at 80, let's say 2 Rand a minute, for instance, taking into account overheads, fixed costs, all of that. It's costing you 2 Rand a minute per unit. Um, and you might find that with the new technology and you're running economies of scale, you may bring it down to 89 cents, per minute per unit sort of thing. So having technology advances, as much as it's an initial investment cost, over time it then just becomes better from a cost saving perspective, because by using the most current technology, you're now pushing through a lot more volume, probably at better quality as well. Then it's market information. So when we look at market information, we also want to look at, from a customer perspective, what is their knowledge. So as the business improves the quality of their knowledge, especially when it comes to the market or from a customer perspective, the business will always want to tailor or want to change the product and make it more customer satisfaction level. So increase the customer satisfaction. So it's looking at that market information and then analyzing, this is the reason why we need new product ideas, is because our customer is shifting and the customer's satisfaction now makes more sense. So we need to look at it from the customer perspective. Then we have legal and political changes. So as the political and the sort of legal environment changes, trade changes between countries or between partners. So it can either be an increase or a decrease in the availability of certain components. And it may open the business up to looking for newer options or newer solutions. Like, for instance, when COVID hit, a lot of businesses that were looking at more from an import-export perspective, or let's say they were just importing raw materials, etc., the timeframes then became a whole lot longer and a whole lot more expensive. So they now needed to search for different brands that is more local, that they could be able to have more accessibility to their raw materials at a better landed cost or better pricing. Also, when you look at it from a political perspective, if you look at like Russia and Ukraine, for instance, or even the USA, a lot of business has now shifted purely based on politics. And it's forced people to look at other options of trade and how they can better service their business and still change a supplier at the end of the day. And then when we speak about general, for instance, it's basically changes in the availability of your suppliers that you currently have. So some suppliers may have a specialized sort of standard when new ideas, basically needs to be developed, or they may improve different components and it allow for reduced rate. So it's basically based on the availability of your suppliers at the end of the day. Okay. Is there any questions so far before I move on? I'm sure you would understand that this is quite an interesting topic at hand so far. Okay. The next one that we're looking at, what you're going to see a lot of as we go further on in the semester, is something called Kaizen. Okay. So Kaizen is basically translated as something called good change is improvement. Okay. So when we look at it, we characterize it according to feedback. And when we look at feedback, we want to talk about, we want to reflect on the actual process. When we look at efficiency, we want to basically reduce, or we want to eliminate anything that is suboptimal or like wastage in the business. And then evolution, where change is incremental for the business. The different features of Kaizen, and I'm pretty sure you would have caught the gist of it already, but Kaizen is all about process improvement at the end of the day. So when we're looking at the different features of Kaizen, we want to look at the fact that any improvement is good, even if it's a small change. I always say in business, especially in the business I am in, if I even get better by 0.5%, it's a marginal improvement over time. So even if my auto scoring, for instance, is 90%, and then I go to 91% and 91.5%. For me, that's a process improvement, and that's me getting better, as opposed to me now going back to 70%. Okay. You want to also, from a Kaizen perspective, you want to get as many ideas as possible. And who better to get ideas from than the people that actually work with your product? Whether it's from a service perspective or whether it's from a product perspective, maybe your customer wants to change your production process, or your employee wants to see a better production process and he has an idea of how to improve it. He can stipulate this to you. Or your distribution process should be changed, or your warehousing process should be changed. So any ideas that your workers sort of develop is always good. As I said, small improvements has less investment. If you can, the main idea is if you keep doing things the same way, unfortunately the result doesn't change. But if you make small changes and you have an improvement, you end up with a better result. Okay. And then you also want ownership for individual tasks. So where you want better morale, team, worker, anything from a motivation perspective. So I put in there an example of Woolworths. Okay, so when we speak about Kaizen, when we speak about sort of the Woolworths example. So Woolworths itself, and I don't know if this has changed, okay, but Woolworths basically encourages a lot of their employees to make small continuous improvements, especially in their day-to-day tasks. For example, if a person working in their store regularly, sees a minor, let's say, adjustment in their way they arrange their shelves, so that a customer gets better customer experience, and you end up with an improved sale. Like the person who put the sweets at the till, like as you walk down that long till in Woolworths, brilliant idea for Woolworths, not brilliant idea for the parents, that has to stop at every corner to pick up a sweet. So, it's improvements such as that. So they also have basically formed a culture where the employees, no matter what level you are, you're encouraged to share ideas for improvement. Whether it's through a brainstorming session or a suggestion box, whatever your business basically wants, it encourages employees to contribute different ideas. A lot of times what happens is, especially the big bosses, they sit there, they have multiple things that they need to do. They never ever get to looking at how they can best change the business and have marginal improvements. So a lot of times what happens is the people that are on the floor, that are seeing it every single day, they're the ones that can now say, okay, this is what I think we should do. Okay. Yeah, so that's basically Woolworths. I mean, you can 100% read up on it just so that you have a little bit more of an understanding. So, I mean, from a feedback perspective, when we're looking at Woolworths, you'll have regular feedback sessions where you can reflect on some of the suggested improvements. So in my previous lifetime, in my previous job, we had something called OHI sessions. So it's like occupational health initiatives. And here we would get one person per department to sit in this meeting once a month. And we now try and find or brainstorm different ideas of how we can continuously improve the branch specifically, whether it means, painting of parking bays or putting up an awning at a specific place or cleaning out a window in a different place. Small, it's minor improvements, okay, but it's stuff that increases the morale of the employees as well, because it now allows for you to have better employee feedback, employee engagement, all of this. Okay, so that's Kaizen. We'll go through it a lot in depth, but Kaizen's brought into this learning unit specifically because we're speaking on change, we're speaking on new product ideas, we're speaking on how best we can increase customer satisfaction. So that's why Kaizen's used in this example. Okay, then we want to go into looking at customer satisfaction and mass customization. I'm just like spitballing the topics here, okay? So when we look at customer satisfaction, we spoke about it previously. We want to look at it's basically the measurement of your product and how it meets your customer's expectation. And when we're looking at mass customization, which is something that we never spoke about in this session, it is basically something that replaces max production. Okay, so a lot of times, especially in this market now, people don't want just mass products of a specific item. They want something that's mass customized, especially when you're looking at different opportunities in the e-commerce market. You want a better variety. So you want every product to be sort of individually customized. That is sold, over the internet, from an e-com perspective. So your mass customized products basically need to compete with products that most times is readily available in the market immediately from a retailer or a local store, whatever it is. So what is appealing about a mass customization is the business or the organization's ability to provide the product as a customized product to an individual customer according to what their need is, and respond to that specific product, and from a just-in-time perspective. Okay, so you're producing it just in time for the product, for the customer, and it's not being mass produced. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Then we want to speak a little bit more about the future when we're looking at from a design process perspective. And I'm not going to go too much into it because I want to take another example. And I know I've got your Woolworths, but I've got a different example here. But the future sort of design process is you want to look at it more so from what is influenced by future trends, whether it's a trend that shot up in a first world country or AI shot this trend out, whatever it may be, but it's sort of continuous improvement that helps the business from a design perspective, how best they can develop the product, and that sort of thing. So the example that I want to go through specifically is discovery. So we all know discovery in terms of medical aid, so discovery health. So we put it into different sort of categories, okay? And you learn about the different categories, especially when, if it does come up in your assignment. But economy specifically, you want to understand that a company like Discovery Health wants or has a growing focus growing focus on, whether it's healthcare or whether it's wellness care. So they offer obviously a whole host of different health plans, and they push for people's healthy living. And through healthy living is one of their products, which is the Vitality Program. So it rewards people for engaging in the gym, anything from a health promoting activity, whether it's you've got a contract with Virgin Active, and then you can have a little kawaii when you're done, sort of that concept. So in times of an economic downturn, they also have very flexible options, like from a payment perspective, so that you still continue having access to your healthcare. So that's where your economic pressures now come into play. From a tech side, they obviously have a lot of advanced technologies, whether it's your health devices that you can wear as a watch, those sort of smart watches, and a lot of AI. So you'll see if you are in any of their programs, a lot of AI where they basically enhance their services. They've got their mobile app where you can consult with doctors virtually. You can get your medical records, you can transfer your medical records, you can get basically customized and personalized health advice based on the data that you get from your watch, for instance. Then they have like a product, so which is their virtual health services. So basically, beyond a physical product, they have that virtual product. So that's where the meta product comes into play. So this online platform basically has a lot of health management tools, whether it's consultations, fitness programs, those sort of things. And then competitive pressure. So we can understand that the healthcare market itself is very highly competitive, but people always look at Discovery as the high end uh, healthcare provider, or in the healthcare market, because of its continuous innovation, continuous improvement, that sort of thing. Whether it's their vitality program, whether it's their rewards program, they use a lot of gamification where they motivate their members to have a healthier lifestyle or health goals or whatever it is. So this is where sort of the future is going into. I mean, I'm not sure about the other medical aids or healthcare programs, if they have something similar, but I think the process, a lot of it from a design perspective, started with Discovery as a medical aid. Okay, and then obviously they went bombs blazing into banking and everything else. Okay. And then the last one is your environmental issues. Um, and this is basically from a sustainability perspective, whether it is promoting anything from an environmentally friendly practices. They like to encourage a lot of digital interactions or reduction in paper, that sort of thing. Um, and that's basically us for today. Does anybody have any questions so far? Are we all good? Okay. Well, I hope that was a little bit informative for you today. And just a reminder, next week, your ICE task is due. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me at all, anytime. And please check when library sessions are, especially when it comes to if you have started or you are going to start working on your assignments, which I've already posted onto ARC. Make sure you're checking up exactly where, how to reference and where to go if you're stuck to reference. Okay, well, if there's no questions, I will be seeing you and chat soon. Thank you.